So first we're going to start with Ariel. Ariel did her MA in cinema at University of Montreal in creative research profile. She is interested in collaborative processes between Indigenous and autochtone through documentary cinema. Her exploration of the immersive cinematographic language and non-disciplinary brought her to realize and collaborate with different cinematographic projects. So, yes, so she will be talking.
Thank you. Hi everyone, bonjour. I'm going to do my presentation in French, but if you have any question in English, if you would like me to say something in English, or if at the end, if we want to speak all together in English, if it's easier, let's do it in English. If it's easier, let's do it in French, and we'll just go over it. So, thank you for everybody, et merci de m'accueillir aujourd'hui. Donc, c'est juste important pour le type de présentation que je vais faire de rappeler que on est sur le territoire Canada aujourd'hui. Parce qu'en fait, les questions que je soulève, c'est des questions qui se posent de façon quotidienne et qui, pour moi, ont émergé de ma pratique artistique, donc en cinéma, et qui m'ont poussé à faire une recherche-création à l'Université de Montréal en 2017. Donc, j'ai eu l'opportunité de collaborer dans des communautés autochtones dans le niveau des arts. Et puis, à chaque fois, je trouvais que le type de collaboration qu'on pouvait expérimenter était insuffisamment défini. Je trouvais qu'il y avait quelque chose à aller chercher là-bas. Et j'avais envie d'explorer un peu plus le type de collaboration et les problématiques qu'on peut rencontrer quand on collabore entre des communautés allochtones et des communautés autochtones. Et dans le cadre de ma maîtrise, je me suis surtout intéressée au Mexique, parce que j'ai fait une partie de mes recherches là-bas, mais aussi au Canada. Donc aujourd'hui, on va se pencher sur deux pratiques qui explorent cette collaboration-là, mais au Mexique. Donc, en documentaire, souvent, on va définir les relations et les jeux de pouvoir avec ces trois éléments-là, donc le cinéaste qui filme ce qui se passe, à travers un appareil, donc une caméra, un filmant, et puis des sujets représentés, donc des gens qui sont à l'image, donc les filmés. Ça, c'est un peu la dynamique qu'on représente de manière théorique généralement. Et ce qui est intéressant, c'est que l'assignation de ces rôles est déterminée en fait par des choses qui sont extérieures au processus de film. Donc, on peut se pencher sur les hiérarchies sociales de nos sociétés qui sont souvent représentées à travers de ces rôles-là et qui sont souvent dépendent en fait de paramètres liés au sexe, à l'âge, à l'ethnicité, à la race, même à l'orientation sexuelle. Donc, on peut se fier à ce que démontre Anna Maria Alonso, qui est une anthropologue, qui dit justement que dans les hiérarchies sociales au sein de l'État, donc du Canada ou du Mexique, il y a des conditions qui favorisent certains individus plus que d'autres. Et donc, ces individus-là peuvent atteindre des ressources matérielles et économiques. Et c'est ces ressources matérielles et économiques-là qui sont nécessaires pour produire un documentaire. Donc, souvent, c'est bien souvent des gens dans un groupe dominant qui vont occuper la position du cinéaste, et tandis que c'est des gens dans des groupes plus dominés qui vont occuper la position du sujet représenté. C'est pas toujours comme ça, évidemment, il y a plusieurs cas qui vont à l'encontre de ça, mais on peut quand même se poser des questions sur quelles sont les opportunités qu'ont les communautés marginalisées pour produire du cinéma documentaire, pour en faire partie, et quelles sont aussi les mesures collectivement qui sont prises pour aider donc les communautés marginalisées à en produire. Par exemple, les initiatives qu'ont pris certains conseils des arts ou des choses comme ça à travers le temps. Mais moi, je m'intéresse surtout en fait à comment est-ce que les cinéastes, donc les artistes, peuvent concevoir la structure du documentaire, la production et l'éthique de leur approche pour collaborer et pour tranquillement peut-être aplanir le jeu de pouvoir qui pourrait se passer dans une situation comme ça. Donc, le documentaire, ça repose sur une relation avec le réel. Donc, ça repose effectivement sur un cinéaste peut-être qui filme quelqu'un qui est devant la caméra. Sauf que si on essaie d'interpréter cette relation-là différemment et de voir aussi l'interaction qui se passe entre les différentes personnes, on peut se dire qu'au contraire de la fiction, il n'y a pas un dialogue qui est donné, par exemple, à la personne qui est filmée. Et donc, il va y avoir une initiative de cette personne-là face à la caméra et qui va peut-être changer la façon dont le cinéaste interprète le réel. Ensuite, bien sûr, il peut choisir ce qu'il met dans le film, choisir ce qu'il ne met pas dans le film, mais déjà, on peut quand même essayer de valoriser un peu cette interaction-là. C'est une participation, une présence qui est très active. À ce sujet, Kate Nash, une chercheuse, a défendu la bidirectionnalité des rôles. Donc, ce qu'elle dit, en fait, c'est que le pouvoir de limiter ou non la parole qu'a la personne qui filme n'est pas le seul pouvoir qui est présent dans la dynamique, parce que la personne qui participe a aussi le pouvoir de partager des récits, des expériences, d'être en face de la caméra. Elle a le pouvoir de résister et de refuser de participer aussi. Donc, c'est un pouvoir qui est, selon elle, circulatoire. Elle dit que la relation documentaire est une collaboration négociée. Donc, elle introduit le concept de sensitive engagement, où elle dit que la relation se base sur des valeurs et sur des principes communs qui vont être gardés tout au long de la production parce que chacun a des intentions. Donc, c'est une négociation qui est constante. Je crois que reconceptualiser un petit peu cette façon de voir les choses nous permet d'aller un peu plus loin dans les approches de différents cinéastes et de comprendre un peu plus quel est l'apport en fait des personnes qui sont filmées, l'apport de l'appareil et de concevoir un peu autrement le cinéma. Bien sûr, c'est pas suffisant pour parler de toutes les dynamiques et des inégalités qui se trouvent à travers les relations, mais on peut quand même prendre ça pour commencer à parler de documentaire collaboratif. Donc, à quoi on se réfère quand on parle de documentaire collaboratif et à quoi on va se référer aujourd'hui? On va parler de collaboration où des non-artistes vont être impliqués dans une production artistique. Donc, c'est une pratique où on va engager des gens à être plus qu'un sujet, comme on avait l'habitude de les appeler, mais d'être vraiment quelqu'un qui participe au processus de création, qui a un apport, et on va reconnaître cet apport-là aussi. En documentaire, comment est-ce que ça se traduit? Alors, on va voir les vidéocartas de Aurelie Bezacier qui se passe dans l'État de Oaxaca, au Mexique. Et après ça, on va voir aussi un film, l'exemple de Quand reviens-tu, qui a été fait par 3 cinéastes canadiennes dans l'État du Chiapas, au Mexique. Donc, on commence par les vidéocartas. Donc, les vidéocartas, c'est des vidéos, merci, c'est des cartes postales vidéo. Donc, on demande à des jeunes pendant une semaine de regarder une carte postale vidéo qu'ils ont reçue d'une autre communauté et de commencer à scénariser et de présenter leur communauté à travers une nouvelle vidéocartas qu'ils vont à la suite envoyer à une autre communauté. Donc, en fait, c'est comme un échange épistolaire entre différentes perspectives autochtones qui sont représentées par les jeunes. Donc, les jeunes sont à la fois invités à être spectateurs, mais après ça, à être scénaristes, à être réalisateurs. Ensuite, il y a un montage qui est fait et ensuite, ça va être envoyé. Ce qui est vraiment intéressant dans ce processus-là, c'est qu'il y a des choix esthétiques et narratifs qui sont constamment pris par les participants. Donc, ils ont des petites handicaps, donc des caméras très faciles à utiliser, et ils vont beaucoup faire des plans sans trépied, ils vont constamment expérimenter, faire des erreurs même. Mais ce que ça fait, c'est que ça construit une relation de proximité vraiment particulière entre le participant et l'appareil. Dans cet exemple-ci, ils vont s'approcher de la caméra et tout de suite poser une question à l'autre. Est-ce que tu aimes jouer au basket? Donc, c'est une question qu'ils posent aux prochains spectateurs qui vont regarder la vidéo. Ils traversent la lentille pour s'adresser tout de suite au public. Dans l'autre exemple, ils vont présenter une petite sauterelle qui va s'envoler sur la lentille. Donc, on va tout de suite rompre cette espèce de 4e mur, si on veut, l'espace un peu métaphorique qu'il y a entre la caméra, le public, mais aussi les personnes qui sont devant. Donc, on vient de chambouler un peu les rôles et on construit un dialogue grâce à la présence de la caméra plutôt que de prétendre une certaine absence de l'appareil. Ensuite, une chose qui est à mentionner, c'est que c'est une création collective. Donc, au générique, il n'y aura pas un nom de quelqu'un qui va être priorisé à celui de l'autre. Et jamais, en fait, nulle part, quand on va faire de la recherche, on va voir que c'est un produit qui est individualisé. Au contraire, tout le monde qui a participé, peu importe son apport, va être compté comme un créateur dans la vidéo. L'autre exemple que je veux vous parler, c'est l'exemple de Quand reviens-tu, de Iphigénie Marcoux-Fortier, Manon Lévesque et Karine Van Ameringen. Elles vont avoir une toute autre approche, Donc, ça ne sera pas d'éliminer en fait les relations, mais plutôt de les exposer en adoptant une posture réflexive. Donc, dès l'ouverture du film, elles se disent qu'elles sont des touristes. Elles se placent tout de suite sous cinéaste, oui, mais aussi sous le titre de touriste. Donc, c'est écrit dans le générique, touristes, on retrouve leur nom. Ensuite, rapidement, il va y avoir une scène où un représentant de l'administration du village demande qui est dans la salle ici en train de dormir dans ses chambres. Et rapidement, une des participantes du film va regarder par-dessus la caméra et va dire aux étrangères qui viennent de loin. Donc, en disant devant la caméra et les cinéastes, en choisissant de garder cet extrait-là, elles exposent la relation qu'elles ont avec le milieu. Elles sont des étrangères et elles ont une relation particulière avec les personnes qu'elles filment. Et cette relation-là, elle va être démontrée tout au long du film, et c'est là-dessus qu'elles vont baser toute leur réflexivité, jusqu'à même se montrer à l'écran. Donc, dans cette scène-là, par exemple, elles font exprès pour montrer plusieurs axes de la scène, et même se montrer une d'entre elles à l'écran, pour expliquer l'impact qu'elles ont sur le quotidien des gens et sur le déroulement de la scène. Donc, encore là, le but, c'est pas du tout de montrer qu'on est absent ou de laisser couler les choses. Non, c'est de montrer qu'on est présent dans la salle. Ensuite, ils vont même aller jusqu'à donner la caméra complètement aux jeunes filles pendant de très courtes scènes. Mais ces scènes-là, même si elles sont très courtes, participent à affirmer la différence qui peut être, et peut-être même les inégalités, en fait, qu'il y a entre les deux personnages, donc autant les cinéastes que les personnes filmées. Et, cependant, permettent également un partage de l'exposition des corps filmants, filmés et filmeurs. Donc, je crois que dans ces deux expériences-là, des deux approches cinématographiques, le documentaire est vraiment réutilisé, en fait, pour valoriser la participation des personnes filmées et tenter d'égaliser un peu les dynamiques relationnelles qui sont à l'intérieur de la création. Donc, autant que d'un côté, on va aller dans une création collective en donnant plusieurs rôles à plusieurs personnes et en ne limitant pas en fait les frontières entre ces rôles. Dans l'autre création, on va montrer les limites des rôles, montrer les frontières, et c'est ainsi qu'on va réussir, peut-être, je pense, à créer une approche qui est peut-être un petit peu plus collaborative, qui permet peut-être plus de dialogue, plus d'échanges et qui permet de réimaginer en fait le modèle relationnel. Donc, à mon sens, c'est ce qu'on peut appeler un cinéma collaboratif parce qu'il permet un espace un peu plus égalitaire, un espace de rencontre et de création entre des membres de communautés diverses.
Oh, thank you. Does anyone has any questions? Oh, after, sorry about that. Okay. So, Alyse?
Aurélie.
Okay, perfect. No, I just wanted to make sure. So yes, Alyse Tunnell is going to do her presentation. She did her BFA in art history here at Concordia University. She has special interest in philosophy, identity, and politics. She both academically and in her art practice, she explores issues of embodiment, sensation, and sometimes how the body is perceived by the world. And you also have... Oh, sorry about that. She also, the themes of the experience of living under a patriarchal society with the struggles of being neurodivergent, differently able, queer, and femme-oriented. So very interesting.
How do we... All right. Okay. So before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple of terms. So the first is differently abled, which is a term that suggests disability as difference as opposed to detriment. So I'm going to get into that a little bit more in my paper, but just in case anyone hadn't heard that term before. And then also the term crip time, which is the embodied experience of temporal difference and barriers for people who have disabilities or are differently abled. So yeah. Okay, so though it is intuitive for people to discuss disability in terms of space, the ways that being differently abled or disabled changes one's relationship with time is often overlooked. However, the social structures of time that create society today also create many barriers to access for those living with differences in ability. From the prejudice that capitalist prioritization of productivity fosters to the way that pain and self-care change how we experience and manage our lives, time shapes our social understanding and embodied experience of disability. Using the social model of disability, this paper explores how time and disability intersect in contemporary art practices that express experiences of crip time. To illustrate how temporal barriers and issues of productivity shape the lived experience of disability, I will discuss Aslan Thomas's work, 3 Windows from 2018, as well as my own artwork, Journey Map number 2 from 2016. So for me, this is a personal project as I identify with the terms disabled and differently abled because of my experiences living with chronic pain, a mood disorder, as well as being neurodivergent. It is thus my intention to reframe how we understand disability in contemporary culture through bringing awareness to the nuance of difference in embodiments. So, to begin, first let's discuss what disability is. Though there are a variety of ways to theorize disability, I'm working with the current standard model, which is the social model. The social model suggests that disability is socially constructed since what qualifies someone as disabled is culturally specific, changing based on when and where someone lives. Further, it suggests that disability is inherently related to both what our culture considers disability to be, as well as what individuals experience as being disabling. In other words, both societal understandings and individual experiences come together to create disability. So for example, most vision issues in contemporary culture are seen as not really disabling because we have access to things like glasses and surgical intervention as well as other adaptations. So this implies that disability is related to the external environment as well as a person's body. Due to the mutable nature of disability as a category, the social model frames disability in terms of barriers to access for individuals, as opposed to previous models such as the medical model, which places disability solely in the body. For example, with learning disabilities, the medical model would suggest that difficulties learning are inherent to the individual, whereas the social model suggests that disability is in the interaction between the individual and their learning environment. The social model is supported by the fact that accommodating people with differences in ability often allows them to function at similar levels to their peers, functionally disabling their disability. With this, the social model demonstrates how disability exists in the relationship between a person's body and their environment. If we understand disability in these terms, as a lack of access, living with differences in ability is only problematic when one cannot access something one needs or wants. To experience disability is to be disabled by an interaction between the body and its environment. So rather than a constant state of being, it is a series of limiting experiences. Thus, I have developed the term disabling experience to describe the moments when a person's environment and their difference in ability comes together to create a barrier to access, such as a set of steps being a physical impediment to someone in a wheelchair, or the stigma of learning disabilities being a social barrier to getting accommodations at work. Depending on a person's situation, they could have multiple disabling experiences in an hour or a day, or just one every so often. To put it in other terms, differences in ability are only a problem when they infringe on personal choice and freedom. With this relational understanding of disability in mind, it is time to bring temporality into the conversation. As historian Douglas C. Baton argues, it was changes in our perception of time brought on by a competitive industrial economy and new theories of evolution that shifted society's view of disability to something notably more negative in the early 20th century. from the dogmatic idolization of productivity and efficiency to the creation of standardized workplace time, both ideological conceptions of time and lived temporalities were shaped by industrial capitalism to the detriment of people with differences in ability. With this competitive economy came an intense fear of human defects, which manifested in a host of hostile legislation enacted towards those deemed disabled, including forced sterilizations, euthanizations of infants, anti-immigration laws, as well as lesser pay for those individuals who could work. The remnants of these hostile sentiments towards differently abled people can be found in legislation around the world today. And realistically, the negativity towards people who have a reduced capacity for production makes sense in a capitalist economy due to the necessity of productivity for social and financial capital, and thus it continues to pervade contemporary conceptions of disability today. Crip time describes the out-of-timeness or temporal distortions that people with differences in ability experience. Writer Ellen Samuels describes crip time through 5 aspects: grief time, or the time spent grieving the loss or lack of our ability; sick time, or the time we spend physically unable to do things; broken time, or the time we spend listening to and healing our bodies; vampire time, or the days and nights we spend temporarily out of sync with those around us; and crip time travel, or the way that our bodies take us out of time, age us, potentially cause us to be infantilized at any age. Because disability is so individual, everyone experiences it differently. For me, crip time is distorted by a lack of energy. In my own life, performing activities such as groceries require more of my energy than the amount of time and energy that my peers would need, which then requires more time for me to rest and recuperate from these activities. Crip time then reveals the problematic conflation of time and energy, as not everyone has an equal relationship between the two. Capitalism suggests that we should spend most of our lives being as productive as possible, but crip time reminds us that for many people with differences in ability, capitalism's insistence on economic productivity is counter to our physical and emotional needs. So this brings us to Aislinn Thomas's work. So through her work, 3 Windows from 2018, Aislinn allows the viewer a glimpse of her experience of crip time. The video, which is 15 minutes and 25 seconds, consists of 3 windows with gently moving curtains, soft light, and such subtle movement it could be taken for a still at moments. Thomas describes her work as an invitation to slowness and a more receptive mode of being. The video presents windows in my home, sites of permeability, exchange, and chance. The project grew out of a body of work that seeks to playfully reclaim domestic space as a site of imagination and possibility, even and especially when it is not where a person would prefer to spend their time. Thomas captures this sense of slow time that people with differences in ability often experience and invites the viewer to sit in on these differently productive moments. This work exemplifies moments where differently abled people are left unable to participate in society and engage with the world differently, often from their bed or couch. Through the lack of both visual markers or a sense of progression, Thomas's work captures the out-of-timeness that constitutes crip time. This context for disabled temporality is fundamental to understanding her work, which at first glance can seem simplistic, passive, lazy, or otherwise inert, all words used to describe disabled folks negatively. When in reality, this work is an invitation to sit in a productive unproductiveness, a common paradox for those of us who experience crip time. As we can see with Thomas's work, duration is an important aspect in expressing disabling experience, since these encounters with crip time exist in relation to time in a social sense as well as an embodied sense. The social temporal expectations that society has for people, like graduating high school on time or getting married by a certain age, can be much more challenging for differently abled people. Often, differently abled folks are assumed to be unable to participate in normative temporalities, since we often experience delays in these social milestones. Further, in the context of relationships, we can be seen as undesirable, desexualized, or incapable of having productive or childbearing relationships because we might need extra care ourselves. Without explicitly bringing these issues into her work, Thomas is able to subvert normative time by asking viewers to question what productivity is and where it takes place. Three Windows invites viewers to participate in an activity Thomas probably does more than she would like. Window watching while waiting for something to change, perhaps uncomfortably wanting to engage with something faster paced, but instead trying to embrace the slowness. In my own embodied experience, I have found that existing in pain and discomfort changes the way that I perceive and relate to time. This phenomenon of pain distorting subjective experiences of time is scientifically founded, with studies suggesting that pain and time are inextricably linked in the brain. Through mapping sensorial experiences and exploring how discomfort changes our perception of the world, my installation practice looks to recreate the temporal distortions that contribute to crypt time. With journey map number 2, my goal is to show how places affect me differently by capturing the convergence of time, space, and discomfort in a tactile object. The piece is a record of one outing that took place in November 2016, including taking the metro, attending a lecture, and doing errands around campus. Each material represents a different space and my sensorial experience of that space. For the metro rides, I used unpleasant materials like steel wool and wire to evoke the discomfort and overstimulation that the metro evokes in me, whereas the dark and quiet classroom is represented by a softer texture and a darker color. The length of each section indicates approximately how much time I spent in each space. The piece is meant to be held by 2 individuals, while a third retraces my journey with their hands. By encouraging the viewer to engage in discomfort in a productive way, I invite them into my experience of crypt time, which often involves balancing pain and productivity, discomfort and necessity. Ultimately, we all exist on a spectrum of differing abilities, some of us living with more extreme circumstances than others. Art is an ideal platform to express and celebrate the differences and adaptations that humanity brings forth. In the instance of crypt time, video, installation, and performance art have all been helpful tools in revealing different experiences of time and social temporalities. If we hope to create a more accessible, equitable, and compassionate society, we need to take the time to understand and treat the diverse spectrum of embodied experience as difference instead of disability. This shift from disability to difference encourages adaptation and compassion. Art can help us to process and accept these differences in ourselves and others. After all, disability or difference is only disabling when it's a limitation. So, thank you.
Aurelie Bezacier is so she studied web and print design in France and in South Africa. She and then started her BFA here in art history at Concordia in September 2018. Oh, you did. Sorry about that. So yes, she began her degree, and she wanted to explore the issues of power, alterity, and inclusion in the visual field. So, go ahead.
Do you want to sit here? Yeah, sure.
afternoon, and thank you very much to the team of CUJAH for inviting me to speak today. This talk will focus on two artworks by South African women artists. The Rain by Mary Sibande from 2010 and Shapungu, The Day Rhodes Fell, performed by Setembile Msizane in 2015. Msizane and Sibande grew up in periods of social restructuration during which oppressed population gained rights and experienced democracy for the first time in their lives, so after apartheid. Both Msizane and Sibande completed their Masters of Fine Arts in South Africa. These artworks illustrate a crucial point in their careers. In 2015, Msizane was a student at Michaelis School of Fine Arts at the University of Cape Town, where the Rhodes Must Fall movement centered. This performance was amply commented on by both journalists and scholars. Sophie was the first internationally famous alter ego of Mary Sibande. In 2010, during the Football World Cup, her project entitled Long Live the Dead Queen featured her alter ego Sophie on 19 billboards across the inner city of Johannesburg. This talk will focus on the way in which these two artists intertwine comments on and extracts from contemporary, colonial and ancient South African visual culture in order to produce complex, overlapping narratives reflecting on their personal desires and hopes, as well as those of their communities and generation. First, we will interrogate the non-linear relationship with time initiated by the artists to describe these artworks as places where narratives from different times and perspectives meet. Secondly, we will look at how these artworks challenge means of public commemoration inherited from the colonial era. According to the Cameroonian post-colonial philosopher Akile Mbembe, the freeing of African people requests a transformative relation to the past. The Rain and Shapungu, The Day Rhodes Fell, Sibande and Msizane establish references to different places and times to deliver an alternative African historical narrative. Sibande declared, "My work is shaped by our historical past and refers to post-colonial theories," end of quotation. The different temporalities and narratives occur at various levels: personal, familial, and art historical. The life-size sculpture was made of casts from Sibande's own body. Here, as in other works, she wears a Victorian-inspired housemaid's dress, a reference to the 19th century British colonization of southern Africa, as well as an apron and headscarf, which further serve to identify her as a domestic worker. In addition to being an alter ego and a self-portrait, Sophie embodies the ancestors of the artist who used to work as domestics during apartheid. The reference to the tradition of monumental equestrian bronze sculpture locates the narrative in the European-born artistic context. But in the depicted scene, Sophie, by closing her eyes, escapes her condition. Sibande declares, "Her imagination is her escape. If she opened her eyes, it would be back to work," end of quotation. The fabric used to make this dress is called shweshwe, after the king Moshoeshoe I, who was the founder of the Basotho nation. Thus, we see in this sculpture the presence of Sibande and her foremothers intertwined with an indictment of white colonial presence on the African continent. Now, on the 9th of April 2015, Cecil Rhodes' statue was removed from the University of Cape Town. On this occasion, Msizane performed as Shapungu, a character she invented. Rhodes was a 19th century mining magnate, founder of the De Beers Diamond Company, Prime Minister of the Cape Colony and colonist of Mashonaland, then named Rhodesia, which became Zimbabwe. During the 1880s, a gold rush led colonists to invade the region. Despite the protests of the Shona people, the medieval archaeological site of Great Zimbabwe was looted by European settlers. On the site, they store eagle soapstone statues. In 1980, when Zimbabwe achieved independence, all looted birds returned to the site except for one, which remained in Cape Town at Rhodes' Grooteschuur estate. Shapungu is an incarnation of the remaining eagle. Despite the indisputable Africanity of the site of Great Zimbabwe, Rhodesian archaeologists argued that it had been built by various biblical or northern populations rather than by the Shona people. Thus, Rhodes appropriated the eagle soapstone statues as a sign of white African prestige. He purchased one of the looted birds and ornated Grooteschuur estate with numerous imitations. The site of Great Zimbabwe, along with other Zimbabwe and some 4,000 medieval mines on the Saw Zimbabwe Plateau, is testimony to the glorious past of the Monomotapa Empire. Zimbabwe is a stone-built construction developed by the Shona elite controlling long-distance trade. The Zimbabwe are located in the vicinity of extraction sites, which may have been in activity from the 12th to the 16th century. Little is known of the function of the Zimbabwe. One hypothesis is that they may have been dedicated to the cult of Mwari, as a complement of the private Shona ancestor cult. Now, Msizane considers Shapungu, the character she impersonates, to be a bridge between generation and, as she says, a messenger of God and the ancestors. Therefore, it is also a character existing across time. Then, half an hour after the removal of Rhodes' statue, Shapungu was still standing, which insists on the continuity of African history. So this contextualization of Rhodes within a broad history of Southern Africa, as well as his location in the background, his back turned to us, ready to be taken away, underlines the resilience and continuity of Africa. The removal of the statue commemorating the colonist becomes only part of a broader narrative that puts an African character at the forefront. Now, let's look at the strategies used by Sibande and Msizane to challenge the means of commemoration inherited from the colonial era. Both artworks present us with bodies of black women, which are usually absent from commemorative spaces. Commemorative monuments' bodies involve an oppressive presence. Bodies of maids occupy the space in an opposite way. Sibande declares, the body is emphasizing the limitation that history has placed on identity, and my work deals with the section of women in society which is often off-center stage, namely maids, end of quotation. On the other hand, on Msizane's website, we can read that she endeavors to call attention to the absence of the black female body in both the narratives and physical spaces of historical commemoration, end of quotation. The black feminine bodies presented by Msizane and Sibande are not idealized, yet despite this sense of individuality, Shapungu and Sophie are not portraits, but character incarnations. Shapungu is a great Zimbabwe statue, a messenger of God and the ancestors, and by representing herself as her four mothers, who were both domestic workers, Sibande identifies as the product of her family's legacy. Thus, the individuality of the characters and the artist is ambivalent. It alternates between individuality and the sum of multiple identities. Commemorative statues celebrating the white and masculine colonial body as an inscription of a historical narrative in the public space give an illusion of objectivity and neutrality. These neutral bodies function as the bearers of a consensual historical discourse. On Msezane's website, we can read that part of her work has examined the processes of myth-making which are used to construct history, end of quotation. Commemorative sculpture presents itself as a depoliticized and neutral mark in the landscape of history, available to all in the public space. Sibande and Msezane investigate the colonial past of their society to denounce the celebration of their past oppressors. By including their individuality into their historical rewritings, Msezane and Sibande reject the illusion of objectivity and universalism in historical narratives. Now, Mary Sibande subverts the signs of power associated with white men, as well as the signs of Victorian femininity, in order to deceive what she called the expectations of the public, and to contest the use of these signs. Sibande associates monumental sculpture and sewing, which are respectively masculine and feminine forms of expressions. She imitates equestrian statue in her portrayal of an underprivileged character, and she makes a Victorian-style dress out of shweshwe, which is a fabric associated with the Lesotho king Mshweshwe I, as we saw. The sumptuous garment is worn by an African maid from the 20th or the 21st century. Evolving in a context of bondage, deprived of examples of heroines she could identify with, Sophie pictures her reign mostly through the signs of European colonial femininity and masculinity. Sibande declared, "My work also looks at the ideals of beauty and femininity represented by examples of privileged members of society and the aspiration of the less fortunate women to be like them." End of quotation. Also, by giving a European name to her character, Sibande refers to the loss of identity of maids who are not called by their birth name, but by names supposedly easier for their employers to pronounce. Since 2011, Sibande has progressively replaced Sophie. She explained, "I am actually privileged and rich at the same time. I am not like my mother, I am not like my grandmother, and I am not like my great-grandmother." End of quotation. And Msezane's character Shapungu is, on the other hand, a celebration of an African heritage. Msezane's work refers to a period of fructuous exploitation of the Monomotapa gold mines by the Shona people. Shapungu did not witness the dismantlement of Rhodes' statue as she turned her back to the scene. On the image, it appears that Shapungu is lifting an insignificantly small statuette of Rhodes. The one eagle remaining at Grotescoeur, property of Rhodes, is the character impersonated by Msezane. And in addition to formulating a statement about repatriation, the artist invites the public to reappropriate the looted Africanity of Great Zimbabwe, and by extension to reject the product of colonial historical narratives. In Shapungu, The Day Rhodes Fell, the colonist is relegated to the back, as if his fall was secondary theme to Shapungu's rise. Nevertheless, her wings opened just as the crane started taking the statue away in a 4-hour-long performance. Msezane's only reference and reactions to the colonial heritage are related to the need to fix colonial harm. She declared on multiple occasions that she considered the use of bronze statues to be ill-adapted and obsolete, preferring a performative form of commemoration. Now let's conclude. So we just saw that the alternation between the individual identity of the artist and their representativity of the social black woman body repoliticizes the historical narratives and insists on the fact that memorial discourse can neither be representative nor objective, but is always someone's individual and social perspective. Sophie, an African character evolving under the domination of white employers, delivers a conception of power inherited from mostly from colonial models, while Sibonde, as an artist, reappropriates masculine and white signs of powers to deny their oppressive quality and their erasure of the bodies of lower-class black women. Shapungu, an eagle spirit and messenger of the ancestor, born in a prestigious pre-colonial context, proudly turns her back to the statue of the colonist. Msezane repeatedly stated that the inclusion of alternative narratives and of black female body in the public space must be achieved without referring to the colonial heritage of bronze statues in Southern Africa. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Alyse. So, does any one of you have any questions for our panel orators? No? Okay. Well, thank you so. Oh, sorry. Yes.
This is for, sorry, the last speaker.
I'm Aurelie.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you all, actually, for your papers. I really enjoyed all of them. But I do have a question just to clarify for Aurelie, or the approach that you're taking, because one is Marie Sibonde's work is actually, so it's cast steel, fiberglass.
Yeah.
It's not a public sculpture.
It is not. That's
it's
very
inside. It's
yeah.
a very museumified piece.
Absolutely.
It's very protected, and it's inside the art world. It's also very sort of falling on very classic examples of equestrian statues where you have like Napoleon on, right?
Yeah.
Going up on the thing and replacing it with a trope of the domestic worker, in this case a female domestic black worker.
Mm.
And I'm wondering, so this is one half of it, it's something that doesn't feel right, so I think you're right to point out that ambivalence.
Mm-hmm.
It's I've seen other work by this artist, and
yeah.
it's a trope that she used commonly, this domestic in this blue dress with that material. And there's a sense that there may be risking some kind of romanticization of that figure. And so I contrast it with this, where this is a very different kind of intervention. This is much more activist in the public space, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to, like, they're saying different things quite loudly,
Absolutely.
but just so different. So I'm seeing how they come together, where one is romanticizing, and perhaps there's this point where this one celebrates it, but can that celebration be more critical? Do you see? Because it might just be unproblematic celebration.
Do you consider that Seton William Cézanne's celebration is not problematized enough, or?
Yeah, because it's what
Yeah.
the people want to see, right? That it's going to continue on, and that road statue can
Yeah.
go fall down.
It's actually interesting to see that the angle from which the picture was taken conveys this whole very glorious vision, when she was performing, so there are videos that we can see. She's very tiny, people couldn't really see her. Some people even wondered why she was standing here. So yeah, the angle of the photo makes
this is
it
beautiful.
small. Yeah.
This is something.
So I don't know if it really answers your question.
Yeah, it's just to push it a little bit further, because there are questions that come up.
Absolutely. I also liked that he was saying that this is so Sibonde's piece was made for galleries. It was made to be exhibited in museums. And if you get closer to the statue, you can see that this is fake. This is not even trying to resemble bronze, and the techniques are so incompatible. We could never put this outside. Nevertheless, she exhibited her work on billboards. So back when it was exhibited in 2010, many people reacted strongly to the work and took photos of themselves with it, having this in the background. I should have taken photos of this. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, we could talk
It was
more.
her way to, yeah. And also, so Sophie, the artwork is representing Sophie's daydreaming. So it's Sophie's internal world. It is her dream. None of this is real, and we can see it as we get closer to the statue. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't even really look like bronze, or doesn't really look like that. Almost looks a bit costumey. Yeah. Thank you.
So, is there any more questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much to everyone for coming. Thank you to our